Locked up for life at 18, how one teen's mistake landed him in solitary forever. The sound of the steel door slamming shut echoed through the long hallway. Bang! It was so loud it made the walls shake. Inside the small gray cell stood a young man, only 18 years old, his hands trembling as the lock clicked into place. The room was cold, empty, and no bigger than a small bathroom. No window, no one to talk to. Just 4 gray walls and the heavy silence that felt like it could crush him. This was Kenneth Young's new world, solitary confinement. He had been told he would spend the rest of his life behind those bars. No chance of release. No chance to see his mother again outside those walls. He pressed his forehead against the metal door and whispered, "I was just a kid. I didn't mean for it to go this far." But the guards didn't care. To them, he was just another criminal, one of the bad ones. The lights buzzed overhead, and the sound of distant shouting from other cells echoed down the corridor. Just 4 years earlier, Kenneth was a regular high school student in Tampa, Florida. He liked basketball, music, and hanging out with friends. But when his mother got involved with a drug dealer, everything began to fall apart. The man, an older guy named Willie, started using Kenneth for his own crimes. He convinced the boy to help him rob hotels. "No one's gonna get hurt," Willie promised. "We just need the money." At first, Kenneth was scared. He was 15, too young to know how dangerous it really was. But he wanted to help his mom, who was deep into drugs and had no control over the man who ran their home. So Kenneth went along thinking it would all be over quickly. One robbery turned into 2, then 3, and soon it became something he couldn't stop. Each time he was more afraid, but each time Willie forced him to keep going. Then, one night, everything changed. They stormed into a hotel with masks on and guns in their hands. Kenneth's hands were shaking as he pointed the gun, not even realizing his finger was on the trigger. The hotel clerk was crying. Kenneth begged Willie to stop. "We got enough, let's go," he shouted. But the man refused. That moment, the fear, the crying, the shouting was burned into Kenneth's memory forever. When police finally caught them, Kenneth confessed everything. He thought maybe telling the truth would help. But the judge didn't see a scared kid. He saw a criminal who joined a series of armed robberies. Even though no one was killed, Kenneth was sentenced to 4 life terms without parole, the same punishment given to hardened adult criminals. The courtroom gasped. Kenneth's mother cried out. He stood frozen, unable to believe what he just heard. Years later, when he turned 18, Kenneth was transferred to an adult prison. The guards there didn't like young inmates. They called him Babyface and pushed him around. Fights broke out often, and one day, when Kenneth tried to defend himself, he was thrown into solitary confinement, a tiny concrete room with nothing but a metal bed, a toilet, and silence. Hours turned into days. Days turned into months. He scratched marks on the wall to count time, but lost track after a while. His mind started slipping. He imagined voices whispering his name. Sometimes he screamed just to hear something besides his own heartbeat. Then one morning, a guard slid a folded paper under the door. It was a letter from someone Kenneth didn't know. The note said, "Your case is being reviewed. There might be a chance." He froze. Could this be real? Could someone actually be fighting for him after all these years? The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. The guard was coming back for the letter. Kenneth had seconds to decide. Was it hope or just another cruel trick of the system? Kenneth stared at the letter lying on the cold floor. His heart was racing so fast it felt like it might burst out of his chest. For years he had heard nothing from anyone. No visits, no news, no voice calling his name. Now this one piece of paper might change everything. He picked it up slowly, his fingers shaking. The handwriting was neat but unfamiliar. It read, "My name is Sarah Davis. I'm a lawyer working on juvenile sentencing cases. I found your file. I believe your punishment was unfair, and I want to help you." Kenneth blinked, reading it again and again. He couldn't believe it. Someone had finally seen him. Not just his crime, but the scared 15-year-old who made a mistake. He pressed the letter to his chest and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you." For the first time in years, he felt something he thought was gone. Hope. But inside prison, hope can be dangerous. When the guards found out someone was contacting Kenneth about his sentence, they didn't like it. "You think you're special now, huh?" one of them said, shoving him during a cell inspection. The tension grew worse each day. Some inmates whispered that helping a lawyer meant you were a snitch. Kenneth kept quiet, hiding the letter under his mattress, rereading it every night when the lights went out. Weeks later, another letter arrived. Sarah wrote that a new Supreme Court case might help him. It argued that life without parole for minors could be considered cruel and unusual punishment. She wanted to file a motion for his release. Kenneth couldn't stop shaking as he read those words. For years, he'd been treated like a monster, but now someone was saying maybe, just maybe, the system had been wrong. Still, fear haunted him. He had spent so long in solitary that being around people scared him. Even when he got to speak with Sarah on the prison phone, his voice was weak, almost like he'd forgotten how to talk. "You still there, Kenneth?" she asked gently. "Yes, ma'am. I can't believe this is real." Sarah promised she would do everything she could, but inside the prison, news of his possible release spread fast. Some inmates taunted him, saying he'd never make it out. Others warned him that guards didn't like troublemakers. One night, during a routine check, a guard slammed his baton against the bars and shouted, "You better stop dreaming, boy. Nobody's getting out of here." Kenneth jumped up from his bed, his heart pounding. The guard laughed and walked away, but Kenneth couldn't sleep that night. His mind kept spinning. What if Sarah failed? What if the judge refused to hear his case? What if he died here, just another forgotten name in the system? Then, months later, everything changed again. One morning, a guard opened his cell and barked, "Get ready, Young, you got a court date." Kenneth's legs went weak. He asked in disbelief, "Court date?" The guard sneered, "Yeah, don't get your hopes up." As he walked through the long corridors and shackles, Kenneth passed other inmates staring at him through small window slots. Some nodded in silent support. Others looked away, afraid to hope. For the first time in years, he felt sunlight on his face as he stepped into the prison van. It blinded him, but it also felt warm, alive, almost like freedom. When he arrived at the courthouse, he saw Sarah waiting with a stack of papers in her hand. "Kenneth," she said softly, "this is your chance. Don't give up." He nodded, tears filling his eyes. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Sarah began to speak. "Your Honor, this young man was sentenced to die in prison for mistakes he made at 15. He deserves a second chance." Kenneth's heart pounded as the judge flipped through his file, expression unreadable. The room was silent except for the clicking of the judge's pen. Then the judge looked up and said something Kenneth had been waiting to hear for years. "Mr. Young, the court will review your sentence." Kenneth gasped, gripping the edge of the table, but before he could say anything, the judge continued. "However, the decision will take months. You'll be returned to custody until further notice." As he was escorted back to the van, Kenneth felt a mix of hope and fear tearing inside him. Months more in prison, months more waiting in that cell. When he got back to solitary, the same guard who mocked him before leaned against the bars and whispered, "Don't get too comfortable, kid. Not everyone wants you out." Kenneth looked up slowly, eyes burning with quiet strength. "Maybe not," he said softly, "but someone out there does." The guard smirked. "We'll see about that." He walked away, leaving Kenneth alone again, with one thought echoing in his mind. Was someone inside the prison trying to stop his freedom before it even began? The letter changed everything. Kenneth stared at it for days, unable to sleep. His hands shook as he unfolded the wrinkled paper again. It wasn't from family. He had no contact with them anymore. It was from a lawyer, a woman named Allison Carter. She said she'd seen his story and wanted to help. She believed no teenager should die in prison for mistakes made under the control of an adult. For the first time in years, Kenneth felt something he barely remembered: hope. But in prison, hope was dangerous. Other inmates laughed when he told them about the letter. "Ain't nobody getting out, kid. Don't let that white lady fill your head." The guards didn't care either. To them, Kenneth was just another number. Every day, he walked back to his cell, hearing the same clang of metal doors, smelling the same sweat and fear. But at night, he'd whisper to himself, "Maybe she's different. Maybe someone out there actually cares." Weeks passed before the lawyer finally visited. Kenneth sat in the visitation room, hands cuffed, heart racing. When she walked in, she didn't look like the others. No clipboard, no fake smile, just calm eyes and a folder of papers. "Kenneth," she said softly, "I've read your case. You were a child. We're gonna fight this." Those words hit him harder than any guard's punch. He wanted to believe her, but after 10 years behind bars, believing felt impossible.
The legal process was slow and cruel. Appeals denied, hearings delayed. Kenneth waited months for any sign of progress. During that time, he was thrown into solitary again for arguing with a guard who mocked him about his case. Inside that cell, his mind almost broke. He counted cracks on the wall, sang to himself, imagined his childhood streets. He remembered his mother's voice before everything went wrong. That memory alone kept him breathing. Then, one morning, a guard came to his door. "Pack your things," he said coldly. Kenneth's stomach dropped. "Why? Where am I going?" The guard didn't answer. They led him through the hallway, past cells that had caged him half his life, and into a small office. The lawyer was there, smiling through tears. "You're going home, Kenneth." He didn't move. He thought it was a trick. "Home? You mean out? All your life sentences were overturned. The court ruled your punishment unconstitutional. You've served enough time." When Kenneth stepped outside the gates of the Florida State Prison, the air felt unreal. It was colder, sharper. The world had changed. Cars looked different. People used phones he'd never seen. But the sky was still the same. He looked up and let the sun hit his face. After 20 years, it didn't burn. It healed. Still, the scars didn't fade. Nights were hard. Loud noises made him flinch. Silence made him panic. The world moved fast, and Kenneth moved slow. Yet he found purpose, speaking to schools, warning kids not to follow his path, fighting for laws that give others like him a second chance. His story became part of a national movement to end juvenile life sentences without parole. But more than that, it became a message about mercy, justice, and the price of growing up behind bars. And though Kenneth often says, "I left prison, but prison never left me," his voice now carries something stronger than pain, proof that one mistake, even a terrible one, doesn't have to define a whole life. This was the story of Kenneth Young, a teenager whose crime locked him away forever, until compassion unlocked the door. Subscribe for more true American prison stories where justice, punishment, and redemption collide behind the bars of reality.